including some of the most influential textbooks in the field, as well as 2 novels, including one named after the man we are here to celebrate, Alan Turing. I should also mention he's a fantastic keyboard player for a rock band that rocks from Berkeley. Now, Christos Papadimitriou is a modest man, and he will reject this comparison, but to me, he reminds me a lot of the great Bertrand Russell for at least 2 reasons. One is his refusal to see red lines separating philosophy, logic, mathematics, and the natural sciences. He looks at this as just one giant enterprise and just different angles in which we attack those problems. And the other is his stand as an engaged citizen with a passion for social justice. So please welcome Christos Papadimitriou.
Bernard, thank you very much. Many thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I know it's late. I know it's the last talk of 3 days of wonderful talks. And don't worry, it's going to be easy on you. It's going to be a story. So it's a story about these 2 people. And just to make sure that you realize that this is not an easy story to tell, that I have work to do. This is the score. This is the number of times in Darwin's authoritative biography in which that Turing is mentioned. This is the number of times that Darwin is mentioned in Turing's biography. Okay, and it's in relation to a child's book on natural philosophy that he read when he was 9. Okay, so I have work to do. That's what I'm telling you, right? It's because I mean, what on earth can these 2 people have in common? I guess they're both Brits, all right? So that's. Here's another one. They both came to the Americas for graduate work. Actually, Alan came right here, and of course, Darwin to the Galapagos. Okay, but they both did, all right? So, so really, what? Okay, so here is what they have in common. They changed the world through a scientific work that was extremely timely and compelling. And in fact, it was written in a way that made it aware of its own greatness and place in history. And that's very rare. Okay, so I can think of a couple more such examples. Maybe less. Okay, they have more things in common. They were both in grave danger of scooping when they published. I don't know if you know the gentleman on the left. It's Wallace was a famous natural scientist in the time of Darwin. He was in fact a kind of Indiana Jones. He was going to Borneo, and then he would come back with crates full of orangutans and snakes and apes, and then he would sell them to the British aristocracy to raise money for his next journey to Malaysia and so on. So it turned out that in 1858, Wallace was sick with malaria in a place in Malaysia. And so burning with fever, he woke up and said, of course, natural selection. So he came up with natural selection, precisely sort of what Darwin had been working for 30 years at that time. And he got it all down cold, all right? And then he said, listen, this is going to revolutionize science, it's going to change the world as we know it. I have to tread carefully. So what he did is he wrote it, he described his discovery in a letter to the natural scientists that he respected most. And this happened to be Charles Darwin. Okay, so I was not there, but I know that Charles Darwin fell off his chair when he read this letter. Okay, so and he described, he reacted to it with extreme integrity. He sent the letter to some of the greatest scholars of his time who were aware of with whom he had corresponded about his thoughts about his own thoughts about natural selection. And they decided to have a meeting of the Linnean Society, as it was called. I guess it was the British Academy for Life Sciences. And both papers were read. Okay, the correspondence of Darwin with his friends and Wallace's letter to Darwin. So I'll come back to that. So it was an interesting cliffhanger for a while. And of course, Turing was, Turing's discovery was extremely timely because you had Emil Post, Alonzo Church, and of course Steve Klein also working on very similar things. And in some sense, the world of computation, as we know it, is the confluence of these ideas. All right. So what else do we have in common? They both took their time. Okay. So Darwin was working on his origin for 28 years, during which he published, I believe, 6 or 7 books, 3 of them about barnacles. But he was really working non-stop on his magnum opus. One can only speculate, and people have speculated in volumes, that his religious beliefs, and more importantly his wife's deep religious beliefs, were part of the hesitation and the procrastination in publishing. And Turing himself waited a long time before he published. Okay, so they both wrote and rewrote. For example, there are 6 revisions that were published during Darwin's life. And in fact, believe it or not, on the web there is a phylogenetic tree of these. So you can actually find what is the difference. All right, I mean, what you of the 6 revisions, and there is one parameter that has a harmonic of 2, which is amazing. Can you guess what it is? It is the mention of the word God. Okay, so it has an amazing harmonic of 2, so it goes up and down. Yeah, so you know what harmonic of 2 means? It is basically it means an eternal conflict. So that I overdid it, or I underdid it, I overdid it, and so on. Yeah, so and of course Turing also in typical nerd fashion, he had messed up big parts of his model, and he felt obliged to write an erratum, a 3-page erratum, a year later, a few months later. Okay. So that's a new word designed so that I keep it. So what were I don't know how many of you know, but when Darwin published his book, evolution was a tired idea. Okay, it had been argued back and forth for a long time, extensively by hundreds of scholars for 100 years. Okay, and so that was not, among these scholars was Darwin's own grandfather. Okay, Erasmus Darwin. So evolution was a really tired idea. So what Darwin brought to the world, okay, was 2 things: the engine of evolution, natural selection, which basically nobody understood, and the crazy idea of common ancestry. He said that we come from very few species. He meant one, but he didn't dare say it. Okay, so common ancestry and natural selection were the 2 great contributions. And what were the great contributions of Alan? Okay, at first sight, the great important contribution is that the realization that there is a dividing line between problems into solvable and unsolvable. That was incredible news. Okay, so you know that Hilbert's war cry, quote, "There are no unsolvable problems," was very recent. Okay, so this was a huge contribution. I believe that his universality was an amazing contribution, sort of, you know, perhaps even more consequential than undecidability. And the motivating contribution, which is on the title of his paper, and was a great open problem in some sense, something that, you know, the major open problem left unsolved in the wake of Gödel's theorem, the Entscheidungsproblem. If you could have a decision procedure for first order logic, the answer is no. And in fact, I want to point out, just to cut the story for a couple of technical remarks, universality is a consequence of that in the following sense. Universality is of amazing importance. First of all, it's a windfall of the Entscheidungsproblem. Here is what I mean. That if Turing had set out just to exhibit a few undecidable problems, okay, the Turing machine and diagonalization is all he needed. All right? The reason he came up with the universal Turing machine, with the universality, was that he had a particular goal in mind to settle the Entscheidungsproblem. All right? So it was very lucky that the sort of the career motivating goal, so to speak, of Turing when he sat down to write his paper was to demonstrate that Hilbert's Entscheidungsproblem was unsolvable. Universality was a minority opinion in the 1930s. Okay, all the dreamers of computation, from Aiken and Atanasov to Zuse, all were for specialization. Okay, they were all dreaming specialized devices for special applications. All right, and by proposing his universal Turing machine, and in fact, I believe that what, in my opinion, what makes Turing's contribution to the formalizing what computing means epic, special, what makes his contribution special is how extremely graphic it is, okay? How compelling and inspiring it is, okay? So, you know, you can almost say it, okay? You can almost build it out of Lego, okay? You know, not almost, right? Yeah. So it caught the imagination of people. It caught the imagination of important people like Johnny von Neumann, and the rest is history, all right? So, you know, and of course, von Neumann instilled it into his computers and the von Neumann computer. Of course, it pressured software. Okay, it was important in this way. Of course, you will tell me, suppose that Turing did not have did not define the universal Turing machine. Wouldn't there be software today? Of course, yes, I agree. There would be, but you can only speculate about delays and reversals. Okay, so, you know, in this without Turing, and I really believe that you cannot predict what would have happened. It brought us the internet. Okay, I think that the internet, which to my mind is the greatest thing that ever happened, and sort of, you know, it dwarfs typography and calculation by decimal numbers in its value as a true democratic revolution that empowered people. So I believe that we owe the internet to Alan Turing, and let me explain how. Okay. You know when television was invented? Well, television was invented in the 1890s, okay? When did it take hold? In the 1950s. Why these 60 years? These 60 years were because television was not universal, all right? And it took, you know, when so there were nobody had television at home, and therefore nobody developed content. And why didn't develop content? Because there was nobody to watch. Okay, so these funny chicken and egg loops can eat a century. So out of technology. The point is that when Tim Berners-Lee invented click in the fall of 1989, there were millions of computers on desktops. And all of these computers were universal. And therefore, within 30 seconds, they can be made to click. And within 6 months, they were all clicking. Okay, and that's why the internet spread as a wildfire. Okay, so my last line is very serious. Okay, what Darwin and Turing have in common ultimately is the following, I think. That there is a lot of latent computation in Darwin's ideas, okay? That there is a lot of computation underlying Darwin's ideas. And as a result, Darwin's ideas, to my mind, are extremely amenable to computational thinking, okay? And of course, this is, I guess, in fact, I don't know how many of you know, but incidentally, if you type on a search engine the Darwin Wallace papers, you will be able to download 6 pages that are the debate between Wallace and Darwin, and I totally recommend of you to do not instead of reading Darwin's book, The Origin, which is the most amazing book we have read. Okay, so at Berkeley, they teach it in the rhetoric department because they consider it the most amazing piece of scientific rhetoric. Okay, so if you have not read The Origin, you don't know what you are missing. Okay, I taught a class a year and a half ago where we read 3 books and one of them was The Origin. Darwin, on his debate with Wallace, he wrote 3 pages, and half of this paper was, you won't believe this, was about exponential growth. He was trying to explain to the Victorian public what is exponential growth. Okay, so he did sort of what do we do to high school students or to elementary school students today. Okay, because this was the Victorian public. They had never seen exponential growth. And why was he interested in exponential growth? Because that was an important part of his argument. Okay, he says this is what sexual reproduction predicts that how animals' population should grow. Do you ever see it? No. Why? Because life is tough, and only the fit survive. Okay, that was his argument. Okay? So in other words, and of course he got exponential growth from Malthus, okay? An economist who was arguing about exponential growth in the beginning of the 19th century. You won't believe who was the first person who talked about evolution in terms of algorithms? Anybody wants to guess? It was before Darwin. It was the great-grandfather of the computer. Charles Babbage. So here is what he wrote, and I paraphrased it because the original statement does not do him justice. God created not species, but the algorithm for creating species. Okay, nice try, and very, and beautifully argued paper that he wrote. He was a great believer in evolution. Of course, he did not know about natural selection. After Darwin, this is probably the greatest Darwinian who ever lived, an extremely wise man called Weizmann, who wrote in 1880 the following, and again I'm paraphrasing, the mapping from genotype to phenotype is one way. Okay, he actually said that, all right? And if you think about it, this is the ultimate shot against Lamarckianism, okay? Because it says, how can you incorporate your lifetime's experiences into the genetic material if this mapping is one way? Okay, so that's sort of, and to this day, 150 years later, this is the ruling, the reigning argument against Lamarck. Marcosius de Berzé, one of the mathematician who was also one of the first theoretical computer scientists, in 1966 wrote the following. Our thesis is that neo-Darwinism, by this he meant what is called sometimes the modern synthesis, the synthesis between Mendelianism and Darwinism, cannot explain the basic phenomena of evolution on the basis of physical chemistry. Okay, so what he was saying, what Suze Berzé was saying, I mean, it may sound to you like a little like intelligent design. It was not at all. Incidentally, speaking of that, one of the sad footnotes about Wallace, this great co-discoverer of natural selection, is the following: that he recanted the idea in his older age. Okay, and he recanted the idea of evolution. In the following, he said that evolution can explain everything, but not the human mind. Okay, and here is the human brain. And then he became spiritualist, sort of, he said that some intervention, some divine intervention must have happened, some spiritual intervention must have happened to develop the human mind. And one of the reasons that instilled doubt in his heart about evolution is the following, that he noticed that the British colonial army had bands, okay? And a lot of the bands were Africans, okay? And they were amazing, the musicians. And he said, why somebody who lives in the jungle, a savage living in the jungle, why would he play the bassoon so incredibly well? Okay, so it has absolutely no survival value. If you live in Europe with the salons and so on, okay, maybe, okay, but not in the jungle, all right? So you see, Wallace had missed universality, right? I mean, this is the argument that he missed, okay? That you only need +1 repeat and check for 0 to get to universality, right? And so that's all right. You heard Les Valiant, okay, another great computer scientist who has been arguing about the theory of Darwin, okay, and Darwin and Les echoes Marcosius de Berzé's disbelief, and he puts it perhaps a little more eloquently this way, and I mean what Marco and Les are saying is not that they don't believe evolution, okay? They say the following, which I believe is important and true, okay? That physicochemistry is not enough. The little mathematics that have been developed so far in order to support evolution is not enough. There are really beautiful mathematical tricks that we are missing, okay? There are really beautiful mathematical theories that still stay on our way of really understanding how evolution happens, okay? All right, so, and of course, Les proposes learning as a framework for understanding evolution, all right? So, I'll tell you about something else. There is, there is a lot of inspiration from optimization in the students of evolution and from evolution in the students of optimization, okay? And as we know, inspiration, you cannot do anything without inspiration, but sometimes inspiration can take you a little further than it should, okay? So let me explain what I mean. There is, for example, simulating annealing is inspired by asexual and the other local search algorithms. They are inspired by asexual natural selection, okay? Natural selection when you only have mutations, there is no recombination. And people code them, and there are practitioners that swear by them, that they work very well. On the other hand, the genetic algorithm, which is inspired by natural selection under sex recombination, I make enemies every time I make the mistake of saying this, but they don't work. Believe me, they don't. Genetic algorithms, basically, they are the world's most beautiful, compelling, attractive idea. Every time you explain it to a practitioner, their eyes light up. They say, "I'll go to my lab, and in a week I'll have the results." And 3 months later, they come with their head down. Okay, and the reason is that they really don't work. Okay, and this, to my mind, is an amazing mystery. Okay, because in nature, sex is successful and ubiquitous. Okay, so. What do I mean by that? I mean the following, that you look at the tree of life, all right? Visualize the tree of life, hundreds of billions of species, okay? Which ones are asexual? This, that, and that, okay? So, there are isolated twigs in the tree of life, okay? And I say twigs in the sense that they come from ancestral species that were sexual and lost it, okay? So, because the environment favored asexuality for some reason, all right? But the point is that sex is everywhere, okay? So, so it's recombination is, like proteins are everywhere, RNA is everywhere, ribosomes are everywhere, and recombination is everywhere, okay? So, I believe it's one of the 5 or 6 most basic ideas in life, all right? All right, so what's going on? But sex is itself a mystery in biology. Here is why. It wastes half the genes. What do I mean by that? Imagine that you are a young lady and you have 2 children, all right? And then you look at these children and you say, these 2 children together, they have one copy of my DNA. And the other one comes from the oaf on the couch, okay? Why am I doing this to myself? If I worked parthenogenetically, they would have 2 copies of my genes, and my genes would love it. Okay, why am I doing this? Okay, so this is called the load of sex. Okay, so and it weighs half the genes. Okay, it's very hard to explain why organisms choose to do that. Also, it breaks down lucky combinations. What do I mean by that? Okay, I mean the following: that imagine that you get the perfect gene for liver and the perfect gene for hemoglobin, okay? So, that's an incredible combination. It makes you live for 200 years, okay? What's the problem? During these 200 years, you father 70 children, okay? But all of them, none of them has your combination, because where are you going to find a bride that has the same combination as you? You see my point? So they tend to break down lucky combinations. So that's another unfortunate thing and also, of course, the mechanisms for sex have a lot of genetic complexity. I mean, why did nature develop this? I mean, energy cost to the organism. And in 1998, there was an amazing review paper in Nature, where they said, okay, there are 5 different theories why sex, and none of them works. None of them explain sex. And it has been called the queen of problems in evolution. Okay, so here are the parallel mysteries, just to build up a little more. Why is sex successful in life but unsuccessful when coded in heuristics? And why sex is ubiquitous in life despite its costs, its load? All right, so this part of the question had been bothering me for years, okay? And this part of the question was bothering me for years. My friend Adi Livnat, a PhD 5 years ago from Princeton's biology, and since then a postdoc at Berkeley and now a professor at Virginia Tech. And when I first met Adi, I told him this, and he told me that. And then we sat and, we met for an hour, and then we missed dinner, okay? So, towards then, we looked at each other, and we had a really radical idea. What if the reason for this is that sex, recombination, is a very mediocre optimizer of fitness? It really does not do well. Yeah, it's really a bad idea. So you know that it breaks down good combination. Okay, that it hurts the organism by transmitting only half the genetic material. It's true. Well, everything is true. What if sex has something else which is good? Okay, it optimizes something else. Optimizes is very, very dangerous word to use this in the context of evolution, but I'll tell you now. What if it does something else? Okay, and all we have to do is look for something that is something else. We couldn't find it. Okay, so we found the concept that explains both sides.
Could you just take the law off of
I lost what? Yes. I think it. Okay. All right. So, thanks. Since when do I have to repeat? I'm joking. Okay. And we found, we thought hard. We experimented with the math and the biology, and we found the answer. And the answer is something that we call mixability. And as the year, that started 5 years ago. As the years go by, we are more and more certain about it. So 3 years ago, we published a paper in PNAS with Adi Livnat, that's myself, that's Jonathan Dushoff from Rochester, and the last one is Marcus Feldman, a very distinguished biologist at Stanford, working, on sex. And we established the following: that natural selection under A-sex optimizes fitness. In other words, it strives to create and keep and propagate the most fit gene combinations. Everybody knew that. All mathematical models know that. But under sex, it favors something else called mixability. And mixability is, roughly speaking, the ability of alleles, gene variants, I mean by alleles, to perform well with a broad spectrum of other alleles. In other words, maybe your gene for hemoglobin, okay, is not the best possible, okay? So in the sense that there are other genes that in the right combination, they work better. But your gene for hemoglobin has the property that it collaborates, it performs fairly well, adequately. Nothing brilliant, but okay, with everybody else's genes, all right? So that's what mixability is, all right? So let me explain to you mathematics. Imagine that this is a two-gene organism, okay? An organism that has two genes, okay? Hypothetical, no such, Pinocchio should be here, right? I mean, no such thing exists. But imagine that there is another gene A and gene B. Gene A comes in 4 variants, gene B comes in 5 variants. And what are these numbers? These numbers are the fitness, okay? Fitness means how successful is the organism going to be if it has this combination, right? And the fitness in population genetics basically is how many offspring, how much offspring in expectation, capable of reproducing, are you going to produce? And this is fine, okay, this combination is good, this combination is terrible, this combination is amazing, okay? So you have that's called the fitness landscape. It's a matrix, okay? And in general in us is a 20,000 dimensional tensor, okay? Now, A-sex, asexual evolution, is going to isolate the big numbers, okay? And going to focus on those. And these are going to basically spread like wildfire through the population. And eventually, even this is going to defeat this, and the whole population is going to look like that. Okay, it's going to have this allele and this allele. In contrast, that's what an asexual species would do. In contrast, sex will choose the rows and columns that have the best average. Okay, the mixable alleles. Okay, and we'll focus on them. That's the difference. Okay. So what's the argument for mixability? We have extensive simulation over random fitness landscapes, which we published in our original PNAS article. We have a proof. So the reason why you cannot have a proof is the following: that the dynamical system that I actually described to you almost completely, that is defined by this matrix, is highly nonlinear and therefore impossible to predict in a mathematically tractable way that we are able to. But we can find some cases that linearize, okay? And for these linearized cases, we predict exactly this, that A6 will go for the peaks and make them dominant and eclipse everything else will be extinct. Whereas sex, a sexual species with the same landscape, with the same fitness landscape, will all the peaks will be extinct, all the isolated good combinations will become extinct, and the good averages will prevail and will basically create the whole population. We have recently, you can prove that for a particular model of, actually, a very well established model of natural selection called weak selection, which basically it reflects Kimura's neutral theory, which basically says that strong selection events almost never happen. Really, what selection means is that a good combination gives you a small comparative advantage against others. Then there we know the following, that at equilibrium, of course life is never in equilibrium, but at the equilibrium of the mathematical model, what happens is that all the alleles that are not extinct have exactly the same mixability. So mixability seems to be what sex wants to optimize in this particular case. All right, so mixability is a new insight into evolution. It tells us that life succeeds in subtler and more indirect ways than we had thought before. And it does so by promoting not quite fitness, but some kind of diversity, robustness, genetic tolerance. And by the way, it has interesting lessons for genetic algorithms enthusiasts, okay, in case you are here. And this is the following, that genetic algorithms may be an amazing idea if the objective, either you don't know, or it's fuzzy, or it's time varying. Okay, so it may be a good idea in such cases. All right. Of course, incidentally, on computable numbers, is this what is Turing's most cited paper? Do you know? Yeah. So by a tiny bit, but it is morphogenesis. So and just to remind you, I know three days you heard it all, that in Turing's mind, this was the world's most amazing puzzle. How from this, which is the fertilized egg, a perfect sphere, you get to this. Okay, I know that this looks similar, but it's not, right? I mean, it's a human who is decidedly not non-spherical. Okay, how from perfect symmetry? How is symmetry broken? How do patterns emerge? Okay, and what he did is he came up with a brilliant idea that you can set up an ODE, something called the reaction diffusion model, and by this you can create patterns. By patterns he meant that you start from a gray petri dish, and then suddenly you see concentric circles emerge. Okay, because the gray is separated into black and white along some patterns. Okay, so and that's not theory. Okay, so this is what Turing predicted would happen, and this is what happens in the eye of a particular fish. And here is something else. Okay, so incidentally, what is the least cited paper of Turing, and it's least cited because it was never published, is on Fibonacci phyllotaxis. Okay. Incidentally, there was a question before. Okay, I'm proud to have the world's largest Turing number, okay? Which you all share. It's infinity, okay? Like, because I believe that Turing never published with anybody, okay? But we have to check about that, all right? Yeah. So okay. Fibonacci phenotaxis, you know what it is, okay? How come patterns like that, that if you count them, it gives you 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 11, I forget, okay, right? No, I know. Okay. Well, here is Turing's statue with, incidentally, the reason he didn't publish it, of course, is that before he could publish it, he was murdered by the English establishment. Okay, so I mean, the last two papers about phyllotaxis and about phyllotaxis and reaction diffusion and morphogenesis are not a surprise. Okay, because if you look back at Turing's beginnings, okay? If you read the computable numbers, okay, of course he was deeply interested in human intelligence, okay, and we know that computational machinery and human intelligence, 1950. But even if you look into 1936, he's on computable numbers. If you read it carefully, if you read it with affection, you'll see that the man was deeply interested in life, okay? He was very deeply interested in human intelligence, okay? In some sense, everything else in his career was a digression, and in his early 40s, in his late 30s, he came back to life, to studying life. Unfortunately, not for too long, okay? So there you have it. I believe that this is one of the greatest men who ever lived. How am I doing with time? Can I? Very briefly, I want to get down personal. Okay, so I first heard about the Turing machine when I was a junior in college in 1971, and really changed my life in the following sense that until then I was, these were probably the happiest times of my year. I was living in a country that was under the boot of a dictator. I was stuck studying electrical engineering. I know it's not terrible, but for me at that time it was. And sort of, and I was, things like communication theory made me suspect that there must be somewhere a brave intellectual universe where you face head-on the world's great problems, okay? And when I read about the Turing machine, which was in a terrible paper about pattern recognition, and there was no motivation, no illustration whatsoever of the definition, okay? So I really immediately realized that this is an exemplar of what I was looking for, okay? So, and frankly, I looked up at my English-Greek dictionary, the verb to ture, okay, and I did not find it, okay, luckily, okay? So 3 years after that, I was very lucky to find myself right here. And basically, the reason I came to here to study, I can now tell my advisor, is because I wanted to get out of Greece, right? And I had my options open. I wanted, maybe I want to learn some math, maybe not, who knows, so. And then Turing grabbed me from day one, okay? Because I took the course by Bob Keller on automata theory, that was Turing's legacy. And then the next semester, Ullman told us about a strange sort of watered down version of this undecidability that was not yet called empty completeness. Okay, and I was in heaven. Okay, so 3 years later, I was teaching the stuff, and with my friend Harry Lewis, we decided to write a textbook on this, and now this textbook has on its cover this image. Incidentally, when I was at Princeton, I lived for 2 years in the graduate college's apartment 2B, which was at the time, the legend was that it was Turing's room when he was here. But frankly, even though I was my life was all about him, my scientific life was all about him. By the time I didn't know Alan. I mean, I knew Alan when I read Hodges' biography, okay, which thanks to the organizers for providing me with a third copy, and I really want everybody, all of you, to read. It's an amazing, amazing biography, and then I had a fantasy that was exactly the same as Dick's. Okay, you know, I read David Gibson's Neuromancer. Okay, I don't know how many of you have read it, but there is a beauty. You know, it's the cyberpunk beginning, and sort of there is an end of a chapter. So you know, well into the book. It was at the end of part 3, I believe, where the hero gets back to his hotel room and finds it full of cops. Okay, and they show him a badge and they tell him, I cannot say that my voice breaking. Turing, you are under arrest. What they mean is that they are with the Turing police, which had already been explained is a police force that is supposed to be busting AI. Okay, you know, but this gave me Dick's fantasy. Okay, what if it's all lies? What if the Brits whisk him out? Okay, so you know, and what if the guys around, he's watching all this. And so this fantasy came to me, stayed with me for a long time. And then the following thing happened, okay? You know, Turing is not my only intellectual hero, okay? In poetry, my hero is Cavafy, okay? So when I was in Greece once, I went and saw a film whose title was Cavafy, okay? And I don't know why both my intellectual heroes are homosexuals. Coming out, I didn't like it very much, but coming out of the film, I remember I was impressed with the director's gesture, which was to honor his hero by creating a work of art and giving it the hero's name. And I swear, I was at the foyer of the movie theater, and I saw a blue paperback hovering above, and its title was Turing, a novel. Okay, so I had never written anything. Okay, I had never written 2 lines of poetry. I had never written a short story. Okay, before that, and of course, it had never occurred to me to write a novel. But that night, I thought about the plot. I told you that I already thought that it was 1997. I already thought that the internet is the ultimate creation of Turing, and I thought, why wouldn't the internet return the favor? Okay, why would the sort of, you know, some kind of hacked up SETI emerge that simulates Turing? Okay, so you know, it was all, you know, so that night I came up with a plot. On my flight to California, I took a stab on the first chapter, which actually turns out it takes place in an airplane. And for the next 2.5 years, I wrote every day until the book was done. I'll tell you this, okay, that Turing changed my life again, okay, and I'll stop because writing that book, I think it's the most profound experience of my life. You know, I put it next to my children, sort of, you know, it made me learn things about me that I never expected existed, and one of them, probably one of the least important, is that I would be writing fiction the rest of my days. Okay, so Turing again changed my life. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Christos, for a really beautiful lecture, which I enjoyed very much. I just have one brief comment. What you said about what I understood you to say about the relationship between universality and the Entscheidungsproblem, I don't really think is correct. Turing-based, I have two things to say. One is that Turing based the proof of the unsolvability of the Entscheidungsproblem on the unsolvability of the printing problem, the problem of determining whether a particular symbol will ever be printed, and that didn't require universality. It came right out of the diagonalization. My own explanation of universality, which I gave in my talk a couple of days ago, was that thinking about the proposal that he had come up with, that everything algorithmic can be done in this very simple way, he realized an apparent contradiction, because the relationship between a machine description and what it does is algorithmic. And so he thought, if I am right, there must be a machine that can do this. And he sat down and programmed it to verify that his correction.
Thank you very much. I learned something important. Thank you.
Just slightly off topic, will there ever be a sequel to Logi Comics?
Excuse me?
Will there ever be a sequel to Logi Comics?
Thanks for the question. Logicomics took me eight and a half years to write. And the reason is that it was done by the most perfectionist artists in the world. Okay, so if I had a way to do it in 2 years, we have the plot, we have everything, so we would start working. But frankly, I don't have eight years for anything. If I knew it was 8 years, I wouldn't have started it, which would be terrible. But that's the only thing that is holding us back. Yes, there should be, or somebody should write a second sequel to Logicomics. It will be about Turing and von Neumann, and would mostly take place at Princeton. So.
Excuse me if my question is naive, but I don't know a lot about biology. But if, for example, sexual evolution favors average, good on average genotypes, how can the fact that it spreads so fast and emerge at all can be explained if the other one is more competitive on the same environment?
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. I think I understand the answer. And it's that there is much more. There are much more important things than what is the best genetic combination. For example, diversity is extremely important. The ability to create new species is extremely important. So just let me tell you this, okay? Imagine that sex, which is true, this checks with what every biologist knows, that sex favors the creation of new species, okay? Then what does it say? Here's a computer science thought, okay? What does it say? It says the following, that the part of the tree of life that is sexual is going to have higher degree, right? It's going to create new species more often. Okay, what happens when a part has higher degree? The other part disappears. Doesn't exist, right? Imagine that you have some nodes that have degree 3, and their children have degree 3, and so on, and some nodes have degree 2. You look at the tree of life, there will be nowhere nodes that have degree 2 ever, right? So these are some of the reasons why fitness is much less important than it seems.
So to kind of follow on with that, it sounds like this robustness that you're getting at would be especially important if we had a non-stationary environment where the fitness function was changing rapidly. So I'm just curious, in your simulations, whether you've looked at sort of the effect of changing, of the rate of change of the fitness function.
So this can only strengthen our argument, and we are doing it now. Let me explain to you our conundrum, okay? We had to convince a very disbelieving community, all right? If we came up with a model of how the environment changes, they would point out this data, okay? So we wanted to use the mathematics that was invented by Fisher and Wright 90 years ago. It had been used by each one of them, so they could say nothing, okay? So, all right, so this is a consequence of the mathematics that you had not seen before. Okay, so that was, of course, yes, this is what we are working on now. So, you know, and you know, imagine that your environment, that the fitness function is Brownian motion. What happens? I mean, so, yeah.
See, I have 2 comments to make down here. And one of them has to do with, this is not a place to have a dialogue about it because it would go on too long. I just want to make the comments and I'm happy to discuss it with you at some later time. But one has to do with the issue of what Turing actually wrote about or commented about in the area of networking and or parallelism. And I asked Martin when he gave his talk the other day whether he knew of anything there, and the answer was not. It was sort of all localized and much more about individual computation and not about machines interacting with machines and the like. So that's just comment number 1. If there is anything in there in the literature that you know about, I'd certainly like to know about it. And the second is that I've talked with...
Let me just interrupt because I might forget. So, frankly, I know a lot about Turing. I don't know the answer to your question. But the first thing I would do is go to the index of Hodges, okay? And if not, at his webpage where there is a lot more that's not in the book, sort of, you know, and say parallelism and so on. You know.
So that was comment number 1. And comment number 2 is I've talked with Tim Berners-Lee on a number of occasions about the work that he did and what made it actually work. And it turns out when he first started his work, it really wasn't going very well or anywhere until the work at Illinois on building the first browser that came out that made it much easier to use the web. But Tim always talks about his work as being an application on top of the internet. So the way you phrased it, it sounded like Turing had written about it. And I know that may not be what you intended, but the way I heard it.
No, I meant
Turing started that, and Berners-Lee made it come out for real, and I think neither of them, you know, you could defend that.
What I meant to say is that Turing, through his universality, through a sort of, you know, a long Rube Goldberg of ideas, created an environment where applications were easy to put on. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
To check the grand progress of evolution over billions of years, we would need a scientific instrument that we don't have, a time machine. The next best thing would be a simulation, I would think. So how many years do you think would be before we know enough about simulating all the biological processes that we can sort of do a grand simulation?
All the biological processes?
Well, a sufficient number to have a reasonable result.
I have a biologist daughter, okay? Every time I talk to her, okay, I find out something, I mean, no, protein folding, okay? What, you know, she's taking a course about protein folding, and last night she was telling me about protein folding, okay? So here is one thing about protein folding, okay? When the first amino acids emerge, okay? You won't believe this, okay? When the first amino acids emerge, there is a lot of molecular activity around, and then a messenger molecule goes out and says, hey, a protein that has this first sequence of amino acids is being produced, okay? And then this messenger goes and fetches a whole faculty of trainers, okay, of chaperones, okay, who basically make sure that some of them simulate membranes. He said, you know, young man, when you grow up, you have to go through this, okay? So here is a simulator to make sure that you can do it, all right? I mean, so and all that. I mean, so it's, you know, every time I talk to her or I read about what we now know about biology, you know, I have this image that God is watching and laughing at us. Okay, so he has a sleeve full of tricks, and we are just sort of, we are just on his palm. So yeah.
I want to thank you, Christos, for an inspiring talk, and it's a perfect way for us to end our celebration. And just very happy to have you here, and like to.
I'm delighted, as always, to come back, but especially for this. Yeah.
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all of you for attending the 3 days of talks. I think it's and all the speakers. It's been.
We want to thank the organizer.
Yes, yes.
Just a
Great meeting.
congratulations, Bob.